Hello colleagues, allow me to take this opportunity to thank one of my colleagues, Senyondo Derrick, who has taken us through the human brain. My name is MUNIAFU Benjamine and I'm here to take you through the transmission of impulses or the route taken by impulses. In everyday life, have you ever wondered when a person touches your shoulder, you turn back and look at that person? Oh, here's a case where you touch a hot object and quickly withdraw your hand. How is this possible? This is possible due to the transmission of impulses. Impulses simply mean electrical messages. Before I go any further, I'll first take you through the new terms in the transmission of impulses. What one needs to know about the transmission of impulses and the basic parts that are involved in the transmission of impulses. First and foremost, as earlier discussed by one of my colleagues, Sanyi Patience, where she talked about the sensory neurons, the intermediate neurons, the effectors, receptors, impulses, dendrites, axons. She talked about impulses as electrical messages, and then intermediate neurons as the neurons that connect the sensory and motor neurons, then the sensory neurons as the neurons that transmit impulses from the receptor to the central nervous system, the axon as the fiber carrying impulses away from the cell body or the route where impulses travel. Here is a new term, the synapse. A synapse is a gap between the dendrites of two adjacent neurons. You find out that between two neurons there is that gap. At the end of a neuron, or at the end of a neuron, that is the axon, there are delicate hair-like outgrowths, as she talked about them, that are called dendrites. So between dendrites of two neurons is a gap that we call the synapse, or you can call it the synaptic gap. So this gap, it is the one that enables, that is vital in the transmission of impulses. Therefore, have you ever asked yourself as to why the brain is the basis of learning and memory? This is because of the synapses in the brain. Did you know that a piece of brain tissue, in comparison to a grain of sand, contains 100,000 neurons and 1 billion synapses, all communicating with each other at impressive speeds? For this reason, the brain forms the basis of learning and memory. Next, I'll move to the process of the transmission of impulses, or the route taken by impulses. First and foremost, when a receptor cell receives a stimulus is simply a change in the environment to which an organism responds. Stimulus could be heat, it could be touch. So when a receptor cell receives a stimulus, it generates an impulse, that is the electrical message, which is passed to the cell body of the sensory neuron. This impulse is then transmitted to the dendrite of a relay neuron via the synapse. So, arrival at the end of the axon triggers the release of the transmitter substance in the synaptic gap. So the arrival of the impulse at the end of the axon of a neuron, as I earlier told you that each neuron, it has the axon, and at the end of the axon are dendrites. So at the end of the axon, there will be release of a transmitter chemical that we call a neurotransmitter chemical substance. And this is secreted from the synaptic vesicle into the gap that you can call the synaptic cleft. So this neurotransmitter chemical stimulates the dendrites of an adjacent neuron to form an impulse, hence being passed on. After the passage of impulses, the transmitter substance is destroyed and a new one is made within the synaptic vesicle so that more impulses keep on flowing. The intermediate neuron conducts the impulse to the motor neuron, which transmits to the effector. This mechanism ensures that the impulses only travel across the synapse. For this reason, we have been able to learn that in our bodies, the neurons are not connected end-to-end like as we see in electric circuits. So that means that from each neuron to another, there is a gap that we call a synapse. This synapse is the one that aids the transmission of impulses from one neuron to another. In summary, transmission of impulses takes place from the receptor cells, then to the sensory neurons. Sensory neurons transmit the impulses to the relay neurons, then they are transmitted to the motor neurons, and lastly to the effectors where action takes place. Thank you for listening to me.
Hello.